Respected sir, I am Tejash from CSCD and today I will be presenting my case study on India's oil trade and consumption patterns. In this case study, I will walk you through how I analyzed India's oil imports, exports, dependency on imports, and sector-wise consumption using Python and data visualization techniques. Here, for solving 5 questions, I have used 3 CSV files. First one is export crude oils, second one is sector-wise, and third one is import and export CSV file. Here for exports data shows values of crude oil exports, and import and export data includes the values of both imports and exports, and for the sector-wise consumption data shows how petroleum is consumed across different sectors. And here I used pandas library to read the CSV file. I loaded the files into data frame, which allowed me to view and explore the data more easily. And here the questions which I have solved from 6 to 10, 5 questions. Sixth question is, how does the value of oil exports compare to imports each year? Here to achieve this, I first cleaned the import and export data by removing commas and converting all the values into the numeric data. This is important because without cleaning, operations like summing up values wouldn't work properly. The cleaned data allowed me to perform calculations on the values. And then I separated the data for imports and exports, calculated the yearly totals for each. And this is the code for the graph, which I have got the line chart. Here it's the output oil imports versus exports per year, and we can clearly observe that imports constantly exceed exports. This tells us that India is highly dependent on oil imports. We also see slight fluctuations in export values over time, which gives insight into trade trends. And the next question is, seventh one, what is the seasonal and monthly pattern of oil imports? Here I decided to focus on the early trends of oil imports. I took the early import values, reset the index, and formatted the data so it could be plotted clearly. And this is the code for the graph chart, line chart. Here it's the line chart yearly oil imports trend. Here as we can see, there is a gradual increase in oil imports over the years, reflecting India's rising energy needs, industrial expansion, and economic growth. And this growth is also linked to increasing demand for oil in various sectors such as transportation and manufacturing. And the next question is 8th one. Which sector consumes the highest quantity of the imported petroleum? Here I extracted data from 2022 to 2023 period and cleaned it, converting any values to numeric so I could perform accurate calculations. I then focused on identifying the sector that consumes the most petroleum. After analyzing the data, I found that transportation is the top consumer, which aligns with the high fuel demand for vehicles. And here this is the code for the graph bar chart, which shows petroleum consumption across various sectors from the chart. It is easy to see how different sectors contribute to overall consumption. This is a crucial insight as it helps policymakers understand which sectors to prioritize for energy efficiency improvements. And the next question is 9th one. Has India's dependency on oil imports increased or decreased? Here I calculated the import dependency ratio. This ratio is simply imports divided by the sum of imports and exports for each year. The higher this ratio, the more dependent India is on imported oil. I computed the dependency ratio for each year and plotted it in a line chart. And we can see here, it's the line chart, Indian dependency on oil imports over time. Mostly above 0.7, meaning that India relies heavily on oil imports for its energy needs. This highlights the importance of strategies focused on reducing dependency on imports, like boosting domestic production and exploring alternative energy sources. And the next question is 10th one. Here What is the share of crude versus refined petroleum in total trade? Here I filtered the data to separate crude oil from petroleum refined and calculated their total values for the year 2011 to 2012. Using this is the code for the pie chart which I got as the output. Crude versus refined petroleum share in trade from 2011 to 2012. Here, which is consistent with India's roles as a major importer of crude oil and a refiner for crude domestic use and export. And these are the 5 questions which I have done. And India imports more oil than it exports, highlighting its dependence on foreign oil. India imports much more oil than it exports, and the import dependency ratio is constantly high. The transportation is the largest petroleum consuming sector. Crude oil dominates petroleum trade compared to the refined products. Here, in each step, I used Python code to clean, calculate, and visualize the data. And these insights are useful for understanding Indians' energy needs and can help guide policy and planning for energy security. And this concludes my case study presentation on India's oil trade and consumption. Thank you for watching, sir.